Give me just 1 second, you guys. Oh, sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. All right, can you guys hear me well enough? Yep, here we go. Looks like I've got my Bluetooth all set up. Well, good afternoon, you guys. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about courtroom logic, and I wanted to kind of take a different perspective on the Menendez trial. And so anyway, I wanted to kind of take a critical thinking perspective looking at the trial. Basically, it's pretty much, what is this doing? Pretty much it's about critical thinking and kind of putting the attorneys on trial today instead of talking about the facts that were presented at trial and all of that, or discussing whether or not they're guilty of murder or manslaughter. So pretty much I wanted to, I guess, talk about kind of setting up a BS detector and, critical thinking. It's a skill. It helps you sift through information, spot what doesn't add up, and to avoid being misled by an emotional argument or clever storytelling. Whether it's in a courtroom, a debate, or even a news story, being able to spot weak arguments or manipulative tactics, it keeps you from jumping to conclusions or accepting ideas that aren't really backed up. So, but I guess some of my arguments for reasons to improve critical thinking, it helps you make smarter decisions because it helps you to see all sides of a situation, helps you think of the right questions to ask to kind of really get to the root of an issue. Because unfortunately, there are some folks who they only tell you part of what's going on and they withhold information. They don't think that withholding information is lying. It's going to save you time and energy because you're going to be able to cut through all the noise and get right down to the real issue, and and stop worrying about stuff that doesn't hurt, that doesn't really hold up. And it helps you stand up for yourself, and it makes it more difficult for people to push us around or pull the wool over our eyes. So the reason I'm using the Menendez trial in this is because it's kind of a controlled situation. It's high emotion, and the situation is controlled, and it's where we can expect to see someone use manipulative tactics to sway which way the jury wants to make their, which decision they want the jury to make. So that's part of the reason why I thought it would be good for us to take a look at the trial, especially the Menendez trial, because that one, a lot of people are talking about it right now. So I thought it would be a good idea to take a different perspective on that. Kind of like behind the scenes, it's August 20th, 1989. Jose and Kitty Menendez were found murdered in their Beverly Hills home. Their sons, Lyle and Eric, were arrested in March 1990, and they were charged with first-degree murder. The first trial started in 93, and it went through to 94. And basically, the defense argument is the brothers admitted to the killing, but they claim they acted out of fear after enduring years of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse from their father, Jose. They argued that the murders were a form of self-defense. The prosecution argument, they contended that the brothers murdered their parents to inherit the family's wealth, highlighting their lavish spending following the murders. Basically, as things stand right now, the first trial, it ended up with two deadlocked juries. I thought there was just one, but it looks like they deadlocked twice. And then, so they retried them a third time in 1995 to 1996. The third trial the second trial was less publicized, and the judge barred cameras from the courtroom. So testimony about the alleged sexual abuse was limited, and the jury was not allowed to consider manslaughter charges. Gosh, it kind of seems like they were zeroing in on them, doesn't it? So both brothers were ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, the reason that this has become, such a hot topic again is because, because there's been some confirmation of the abuse allegations. There was an old letter that I think Eric wrote to a family member or friend, and then the abuse allegations were also backed up by a member of the music group Menudo. So then that's the reason that it's kind of come up again. It's kind of drawn a lot more interest. And then, Netflix has done their series. I think it was Monsters very lately. And that actually kind of got me interested in it. And this isn't a case that I've ever looked at very close before. So, but I thought it would be, like I said, a lot of good opportunities, because there's 4 attorneys going. There's one prosecutor for Eric, the other one is for Lyle, and then both Lyle and Eric, they both have their own attorneys. So there is a lot of interesting kind of arguments and questioning, stuff like that, that I felt like we could learn a lot from. So the first prosecutor I wanted to look at, her name is Pamela Bozanich. I'm probably mispronouncing that. So she's one of the prosecutors from the Menendez trial. And she, in her little clip, she lays out kind of gives a detailed outline, and following the 911 call Lyle made, reporting his parents, and she explains that while the brothers initially appeared emotional, there were some early indications that their account was suspicious. And one of the key witnesses ended up being a Beverly Hills police officer who responded to the scene and discovered some details that contradicted the Menendez brothers' statements about the crime scene, such as Lyle's comments about smelling smoke. So, and we're going to hop on over here. We're going to take a look at, now the prosecutor, basically, they're the ones who, they represent the state. They're the ones who are saying this crime happened, and it's up to them to prove the state's case to the jury. And basically, at the end of the day, the prosecutor's purpose is to ensure, that all of us are treated fairly in situations where whether something criminal is done to us or we get caught up in something criminal. And that's their purpose, is to, make everybody safe and use evidence. They have to prove their point of an accusation. So that's pretty much their job, is to prove a point beyond a reasonable doubt that someone was involved in a crime. All right, so I'm going to hop over here. We're going to take a look at Ms. Bozanich's opening statement. We're just going to take a little look at one of her arguments. So let me hop over here.
Family sofa. He will also tell you what can and cannot be said about this crime scene. Shortly after the killings, Lyle Menendez began to spend money, a lot of money. On Thursday, August the 24th, he, in the company of his brother, purchased 3 Rolex watches and some money clips. On September the 8th of 1989, 19 days after the killings, a life insurance policy which had been procured earlier by Jose Menendez was paid to the defendants. The policy cumulatively was for $650,000, and over a period of a week between September the 8th and September the 15th, $325,000 was paid out to each defendant.
Hey, Ms. Roxy, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while, so it's really good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. We're taking a look at the Menendez trial, and we're just kind of looking at we're looking at more of kind of like putting the attorneys on trial and looking at the kind of arguments that they're making, and just kind of learning how to see this stuff. I just really enjoy being able to see it. I'm like, oh, I caught somebody doing X, Y, or Z. So hopefully this is something that you'll enjoy, and it's not quite as contentious as, arguing whether or not what they're guilty of or arguing evidence. But so anyway, this was Pamela Bozanich, and she is, I'm trying to remember, I think she was prosecution for Eric, because both of them, they both had their own prosecuting attorney, and then they're both their own defense attorney. Actually, they both had their own juries, that was really interesting to find in the trial notes, was that they actually had their own juries. They had they had to wear I think one jurors, they had to wear a little yellow star, and the other ones had to wear a blue dot. It was interesting. I'd never heard of such a thing before. But so right here, what she was talking about is she was talking about, that they made these expensive purchases. And then she goes to the point of, she makes a point of saying, I think she said that there was I think it was 300,000 and some change. I can't remember. I'd have to go back. But they received a really large payout from an insurance policy. Then and that was 19 days after their parents died. And then there was a little bit closer to their parents' death, they actually went out and they were buying Rolex watches and money clips. And pretty much what the argument here is, she is assuming she's making the assumption and putting it in the heads of the people in the jury. She's putting it in their minds that, oh, well, look at how fast these kids spent all of this money after their parents died. And the reason that it's problematic is because they're assuming guilt based on spending patterns, but they're not actually proving a link. There's no link there. They don't have anything. Just because they spent the money, it doesn't necessarily kill for it. I know that I personally, anecdotal evidence, I personally had a family member who inherited $3 million. It was gone for legitimate things. It was gone in just a few years. That doesn't mean that my relative killed someone else in my family. It just means that they were able to pay off a whole bunch of big bills. That's what it means. So, but yeah, we can't just assume that somebody's guilty because of spending patterns, or because, oh, well, this problematic thing happened and then this happened after it, so that means X, Y, Z. That's kind of putting, the cart before the horse. So, and we're going to go ahead and look at the Deputy District Attorney. And we're going to look at his opening statement, which is quite a bit longer, but it has a lot of good information in it.
Is this the way you feel that you should be now in the jury box? Seat number 1. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's right.
That's not in the right order, Your Honor.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why don't you take your seats in the way you're supposed to be here, so that helps us a little bit. No, we're still not right. Carl, hold on a second. Okay, yeah, okay, we're okay. All right, let's proceed then.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will show in this case that Eric and Lyle Menendez conspired to murder their parents, Jose and Mary Menendez. They planned what Eric Menendez called the perfect murder. Pursuant to the plan, the defendants drove down to San Diego on August 18th, 1989, and bought 2 Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns from a Big 5 sporting goods store using false identification. They committed the killings on a Sunday night, a night when the Menendez household maid, was not there. The defendants had a ready alibi when questioned by police. Eric Menendez told the police that he and his brother went to see Batman in Century City, and that they then went to Santa Monica to the Taste of LA. It was some kind of a wine tasting function. According to Eric Menendez, they just happened to come back home to pick up some false ID, some fake ID for a night on the town, when they came upon the brutal slaying of their parents. The defendants were the ones to call 911 and report the killings initially to the police. The investigation into the murders of Mary and Jose Menendez was thus begun. The investigation revealed that Jose Menendez suffered a shotgun wound to the back of his head, as well as 4 other shotgun wounds. Mary Menendez suffered 10 shotgun wounds, including a contact wound to her left cheek. 2 shotgun blasts shattered panes in the French doors in the family room where the victims were killed. On August 24th, 1989, 4 days after the killings, Eric and Lyle Menendez went to Slavic Jewelers in Beverly Hills and purchased Rolex watches and money clips for some $15,000. The defendants thereafter collected $200,000 each on September 8th, 1989, and another $125,000 each on September 15th, 1989, in insurance proceeds from their father's life insurance policy. In addition to the defendant's alibi, the evidence will show that Eric Menendez tried to pin the crimes on others. On November 29th, 1989, over 2 months after the slayings, and with the investigation ongoing, Eric Menendez claimed that hitmen were responsible for the murders. He also claimed that Castro might be involved in the murders because his father, Jose Menendez, wanted to liberate Cuba. Defendant Eric Menendez was secretly taped in a conversation that he had with Craig Signorelli at Gladstone's restaurant in Malibu over dinner on November 29, 1989. The defendant is heard to say, "I've known from the beginning. No clues, no one heard anything." The defendant then states his belief that Castro might have been involved in the killing of his parents. The defendant then says, "Man, we're talking about special hitmen, special shotguns, and knew exactly what they were doing in and out of the house. No one saw anything, no one heard anything. We're talking about serious hitmen." The evidence will show that the defendants nearly got away with their crimes. They had meticulously picked up all the shotgun shells from the family room. They had buried the shotguns, and they had indeed an alibi. With the investigation nearing 7 months in duration, the Beverly Hills Police Department finally received a break in the case, information which led to a search warrant on the home and office of Beverly Hills psychologist Jerome Oziel and the seizing of evidence implicating the defendants. With information relating to this evidence, Lyle Menendez was arrested on March 8, 1990, and defendant Eric Menendez was arrested on March 11, 1990 for the murders of Jose and Mary Menendez. Dr. Oziel will testify then on Halloween, October 31st, 1989, the defendant, Eric Menendez, said that he was having vivid dreams of his parents being murdered. He told Dr. Oziel, "We did it." Dr. Oziel asked him if he meant that he and Lyle had murdered his parents. Eric Menendez responded yes. Eric Menendez then said that his father was too controlling. He criticized them. He made them feel inadequate and prevented them from doing what they wanted to do. He said that he and his brother discussed killing their father and getting him out of their lives. They couldn't see any freedom with their father around. Together, they decided to kill him. Pursuant to this conspiracy, the defendants drove all the way to San Diego and purchased 2 Mossberg shotguns with false identification 2 days before they would actually do the murders. Eric Menendez said that his mother had to be killed also because she would have been a witness and would have been miserable and suicidal without their father anyway. Eric Menendez told Dr. Oziel that he and Lyle surprised their parents walking into the room with their pump shotguns. Eric Menendez said his father cried out, "No, no, no." The brothers then began to blast away. After they had emptied their shotguns into their mother and father, their father was dead. But Eric said their mother, who ultimately sustained 10 shotgun wounds, was moaning on the floor and trying to crawl away. According to Eric Menendez, the brothers went back out to the car and reloaded, and Lyle then returned to finish off their mother. Eric Menendez said that they picked up the shotgun cartridge casings, removed their blood-spattered clothes, and placed their clothes into a bag. They put fresh clothes on and drove to a garbage dumpster where they threw away the bloody clothes and took their shotguns and buried them down an embankment off of Mulholland Drive. They then went to a wine tasting party to meet with Perry Berman. Mr. Berman was not there, so they arranged to meet him later that night. The defendants then returned to their house and called 911 as if they had just come upon a murder scene. The defendant, Eric Menendez, said that his father had recently nearly disinherited him, and he told Dr. Oziel that that was another reason to get rid of his father. Eric Menendez said that there was no way to link them to the crime since the fingerprints were their fingerprints since they lived at the house, and there were no witnesses. No one could link them to the weapons, he felt. The weapons were not recovered by the police. He believed there was no way to tie them to buying the shotguns in San Diego. There was no way to link them to the murders in his mind. Eric Menendez said that they felt that they could never equal their father's accomplishments. Eric Menendez was pleased, however, at having pulled off the murders without being caught. The defendants said that they killed their father out of a desire to be free of his control, criticism, and impossible standards. Dr. Oziel, when he asked them why they killed their mother also, the defendant, Eric Menendez, said he discussed with his brother the fact that their mother did not deserve to die, but their plan was perfect, and they did not want to change the plan. The evidence will show that in January of 1988, Eric Menendez was involved in writing a screenplay in which the hero is...
The objection is sustained at this point on that issue. Move on to something else, Mr. Freeland.
Your Honor, there has been a previous ruling on this. The evidence will show that the defendant, Eric Menendez, went to great lengths to cover up his crime, including lying to the police and blaming professional hitmen for what he and his brother had done. Eric Menendez bragged about committing the perfect murder, and he almost got away with it. The evidence will show that Eric Menendez is guilty of premeditated and deliberate murders, the premeditated and deliberate murders of Mary and Jose Menendez.
Okay, something that I guess I kind of wanted to, there's a lot of information in this opening statement. They kind of, something that they're assuming that something that's come out since the trial is when this was happening, not a lot of people knew that Dr. Oziel's confidential tapes were turned over and they were used during the trial as for some of the trial transcript. To me, I don't know about anybody else, but that's not professional. And I don't know how much authority I would really give someone who is divulging my personal information. Even if it is related to a murder trial, I'm not going to have a lot of respect for that person. And that's something that the prosecution is putting out there, that we should trust this person because they are a quote unquote doctor. They also oversimplify what all was going on in this case. They completely glossed over the issue of abuse. They just pretended like it wasn't even brought up or anything like that. When had they questioned a little bit more, there's the potential there that they could have found out more about, what is this other issue about this abuse. Basically, by ignoring that, what this prosecution did is they set this up so that now, more than 30 years later, we're having to go back and go through and look at all this and re-sentence these men. Maybe it should have just gotten a manslaughter conviction. Maybe that's what they should have gotten, and maybe they should be out by now. We don't know. We're not going to know until we go through it all again. So there was that. And then the way that he kind of, presented it to the jury is, they bring up blood spatter and they talk about, that there was a lot of, blood at the scene and then, they're kind of giving it kind of more of like a menacing, meaning ill will kind of a look to it, which I guess they did. But they're painting it in that light. Whether it's true or not is different. We're just looking for the different kinds of possible places that an argument can have a problem with it and something that we need to stop and take a look at. They also went on to, add to the emotional and the kind of the visual things that go with this statement. To add to it, they say, oh yeah, and they were just going to go out and have wine with their buddy. When that's really, I would have a hard time believing that it was really quite that simple and that they just have this, very casual attitude towards killing their parents. it was planned, and it is going to be something that they're going to take seriously. So I don't think that that's not a reasonable representation. They're just oversimplifying it. If anything, that's some place that you should be more suspicious of what it is that the prosecution is presenting to you. And then they also kind of make, I guess, like you would call it, an ad hominem, and it's kind of like just below the surface, saying, "Oh, these are just, cocky, bratty kids that they just want their way. They don't want to do what it is that their father's doing. They just say, oh, he was, overbearing." Well, what does overbearing mean? They haven't told us anything. They're just putting it in people's heads. They're putting it in the jury's heads that, oh, they're just overbearing. And that can mean a lot of different things. They're not giving an adequate explanation. They're not providing any kind of evidence to support this kind of a statement. So then we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at this was Eric's defense attorney and some of the information that she put out in her opening statement.
The special bond that they had, and he began the sexual molestation. And Lyle felt confusion and fear, but he also liked the attention, and he also liked the fact that Dad thought he was important. But as things progressed, objects were used, which hurt, and eventually there was an anal rape, which hurt even more. Lyle confronted his dad, screamed at him, told his mother, "Please ask Dad to leave me alone, he's hurting me." She said, "Your dad loves you. You have to be punished sometimes." The teachers will tell you of the pressure that they saw and of the sadness they saw. And they will admit to you that they didn't interfere and they didn't protect these children because they were afraid of the parents. They were afraid of Jose Menendez, and they were afraid of Kitty Menendez. The coaches will tell you of the brutality and the control exhibited through the lessons, and those who wouldn't go to the extent that was required were fired.
Okay, and I'm going to have to take a little look at this. I'm going to have to hop over here in a second. And what is, because my notes disappeared. I remember when I was in school, I only remember hearing Leslie Abramson, only hear her part of the trial. I don't remember this other attorney's information. Okay, so it was Leslie Abramson and Jill Lansing. So she was the defense attorney at the initial trial. And I guess Charles Gessler took over later, but we don't have any of his opening statements because they didn't allow any press for that trial. So anyway, a couple of things that Jill Lansing brought up is there's kind of a subtle, it can be, not that there is, but there can be a perceived very subtle, like a justification that, that these boys were abused. So, they committed this, they killed their parents. That's never been in question whether or not they killed their parents. But she's arguing for a manslaughter charge. And she's pretty much saying, well, when some, these kids were abused, and so it's reasonable that they would kill their parents. So it's only manslaughter. Also within that, by saying that these children were excused or abused, and then bringing in the testimony of the coaches and the teachers and these other people that were afraid of Kitty and Jose, that's also it's kind of stepping it up and into the range of an ad hominem argument where they're attacking the victim's character. And again, that's one of those things. It can be, it's not easy. It's just something we need to stop and take a look at. Did the abuse that these boys experienced, was it to the point where they would think that their lives were in danger immediately? I don't know. That's for each one of us to decide on our own. So let me take a peek over here. Okay. Yeah, Alta, you're right. They were not. It's starting to look like that Jose wasn't only abusing them. He was abusing other. He was abusing some other young men as well, and that's just heartbreaking. Yeah, I have a lot of empathy for the boys, but it's like this one is really confusing. As far as the father's concerned, now we're getting into my opinion. As far as the things with the father is concerned, that's a little bit easier. Where things get hairy is with the mother and why they killed the mother. That's the one that I keep tripping over. So, but yeah, in a way, it can be argued that she's attacking the victim. At the same time, what some people will call an attack or an excuse, it can also be legitimate. So I don't know if you guys can see that. It's like you have to weigh it out. That's why they've got the scales of justice. So yeah, Roxy, you're right. I do think that they've served their time. They did. They killed their parents, and a lot of other people that other killers have been out in less time than what the Menendez boys have. Than what the Menendez boys have already served. Yes, you're right. He was also Jose Menendez was he was abusing a young man from the boy band Menudo as well. So we're getting a little bit more clarification on exactly what was going on. They have done a lot of good in custody as well. That you can definitely tell that they've grown up and they have a very different perspective on life, and they've also done a lot to serve the community for both people that are inmates and they're staying there very, very long term. They've done a lot of good within the prison community, and then the people that are going back out and they're being put on parole, they're helping those people or those men go back out into the community and be productive members of society. They're giving them survival tools. So to be productive in life, to do better, live better lives. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hop on over here to Leslie Abramson. Abramson? I don't know how to say that right. Abramson. So hold on one second, guys. Sorry, we had a little bit of an interruption from Oliver. He's at the office with me. But let's go ahead and we're going to listen to what Ms. Abramson what her opening statement is.
Witnesses will contribute their observations of Eric Menendez and his family over the years to present as complete a picture as possible of the treatment he and his brother received at the hands of their parents. Because the origin of this killing was a lifetime of abuse at the hands of those same parents. The characterizations of Jose and Mary Louise Menendez that follow as I recite the facts of that life to you are not my opinions. They are the impressions of people who knew them, of people who will testify about them to you. They are also the impressions, the evaluations, the profiling, if you will, of our expert witnesses in the field of battered children and battering parents. Our witnesses, who are family members, teachers, coaches, friends of the parents, friends of the sons, business associates of Jose Menendez, therapists who treated Mary Louise Menendez and Eric Menendez himself, will paint a portrait of Jose and Mary Louise Menendez as parents that will make understandable to you how they could have died at the hands of their children, what they did to their children to bring this about. Our expert witnesses, we believe, are among the most highly credentialed professionals in the areas of research into child abuse and the evaluation and treatment of abused children. These are people, some of whom have never testified for the defense in a case before. They have been prosecution witnesses most of their careers. They will tell you what the effects of maltreatment are on a child, how these effects continue into adolescence and early adulthood, and most importantly, how the child shaped by abuse can be expected to react to threatening situations emanating from the abusers. They will try to teach you something that many of
Okay, so I didn't want to make you guys sit through all of Ms. Abramson's, all of her opening statement. It's very long. Overall, it's big picture. Her argument is, again, it's she points to history of alleged abuse, and she all but says that the abuse directly explains and it justifies the boys' actions in killing their parents. The way that she's presenting the abuse as the primary reason behind the murders, she's assuming that it's a straightforward cause and effect relationship. Well, she's presenting it as a straightforward cause and effect relationship between the traumatic experiences and their decision to commit murder or manslaughter. And there might not be enough evidence there. We don't know. We're just at the beginning of the trial. We really don't know if there's going to be enough evidence to support that. Yet, she is putting that in the mind of the jury, that all of this goes together and that she's going to be able to adequately support it. This is something that we see going on these YouTube streets a lot, is people will just make an accusation or something like that, or even, make up one of their strange rumors, and then people will run with it without even checking into it or even thinking through how plausible something is. And she's making a very broad claim from very limited evidence. She's suggesting that because Lyle and Eric endured a pattern of abuse, of course, they're going to say it logically follows that they acted out of fear for their safety. However, this argument generalizes from the specific instances of abuse to imply that the brothers had no other recourse but to act as they did. This connection, it lacks additional evidence to show that their actions were directly caused by their upbringing. And she's also ignoring some other, or well, I don't know if she's ignoring them, but she's not addressing some other factors. By attributing the murder entirely to abuse, she's overlooking other motives or factors, such as the financial gain or the brothers' independent decision-making capacity. They didn't have to do this together. This hasty generalization, it glosses over the complexities, and it suggests anyone in similar circumstances would act in the same way without considering individual psychology or other motives. And that's kind of dangerous. I think that that's something that we've heard a lot of. And, people will make the excuse. They'll say, oh, well, this person, they were abused as a child. Just because somebody was abused as a child doesn't make it okay for them to go out to the world and abuse, their children or other people's children. That doesn't make it okay. Once we're adults, it's up to us to grow up and deal with these things. Everybody's got trauma and garbage that they drag with them into adulthood. So, and she makes kind of an insufficient causal link. Her arguments, they're based on anecdotes about the brothers' abusive experiences rather than on evidence of psychological evaluations that establish the clear causal link between the abuse and the deaths. Doing this, she's making a generalization based on assumptions rather than evidence to the Menendez brothers' mental states and decision-making processes. She does not know for sure. Essentially, she's risking oversimplifying what is a very complex issue and a very complex case. And she's potentially influencing the jury to interpret abuse as a definitive justification for murder, even though the connection between the abuse and the act of murder, it isn't firmly substantiated. It's not a black and white thing. One doesn't automatically mean the next. Yes, Alta, it is a very sad situation. Alta says, she says, I wish the mom would have believed them and got them the help they needed and got that monster away from them. There's a lot of it. Mom definitely, and if we are to believe, what the boys say is 100% factual, then yeah, I would say that I don't even know if she would have gotten them help. I think they actually got some notes from her own counseling, and it sounds like she had a lot going on herself. So yeah, it's many generations of trauma that culminated in this one action, and in these pain, and the parents ending up being killed by their children. All right, so the next one is some cross-examination of, I think this is Lyle, and we'll take a look at, sorry, that was Oliver. We'll take a look at, I think this is Eric's cross-examination. We'll take a look at this and some of the ideas that are being floated in here. Okay. You want to read it?
Witnesses will contribute their
Examination. Hopefully,
There we go.
yes, would you state your name again for the record, please?
Eric Galen Menendez.
I'll remind you that you're still under oath. You may continue your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, you've testified that your mother and your brother Lyle were about the same size, correct?
No, Lyle was roughly 2 to 3 inches taller than her.
And you indicated that you believed your brother's about 5'11",
5'10", somewhere around there.
and your mother was measured at 5'2" by the coroner. Isn't that correct?
That would be impossible.
It's impossible.
I'm sorry?
That mistake, yes.
All right. It's objection is sustained to the form of the question. Answer is stricken.
If the coroner had measured your mother at 62 inches, 5'2", would that be inaccurate?
Yes, it would.
Now, Mr. Menendez, you indicated, well, first of all, when you said that your mother and your brother were roughly the same size, were you trying to mislead the juries
No, I was not.
into thinking that your mother was bigger than she was,
No,
to make you more believable when you said you were scared of her?
no,
Were you exaggerating?
no, I wasn't.
Mr. Menendez, you said that when you entered into the family room on the 20th of August, you were the first one into that room, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you indicated that the first person you saw was your father.
Yes.
And you said that he was standing up.
Yes, he was.
Do you remember the testimony of your brother who followed you into that room? Is that right?
Yes, he followed me into the room.
Testified that your father was in the process of rising from the couch?
No, I don't
Remember
think
that?
he said that.
You don't think he said that?
No, I don't believe so.
Would that be accurate?
No, it wouldn't.
You've indicated that you fired at the first figure you saw?
No, I just started firing as soon as I came in the room. I don't know who I was firing at.
And at the time that you first entered that room, you saw your father first, correct?
Yes.
And you went right into the room.
Yes.
And did you fire as soon as you got through the threshold of the doors?
That's my recollection. I don't know exactly at what point I fired. I just remember firing right after I got into the room.
Is your recollection that you hit your father first?
I don't know.
As you entered into the room, you kept firing.
Yes.
And you indicated that you loaded 5 cartridges into your shotgun, is that right?
Yes, I believe it was 5.
And at first, when you put in the bird shot, you had loaded 2 cartridges, correct?
Yes.
And you thought that that was sufficient.
At first, before Saturday night, when my dad was banging on the door, and then I realized.
Okay, so this is this example here. It's kind of sneaky if you're not paying really close attention. I think like the first 1 or 2 times that I watched it, my first impression was, what is this prosecutor doing? Doesn't he know? I mean, doesn't he know what's going on here with, with this case? When I looked at it a little bit more closely, what I ended up finding is he is, by asking all these questions that, he asks them, he's specific. I think that he's intentionally kind of testing Eric's consistency of his testimony by, purposely saying things like asking about his mother's height. And he's directly questioning that. And it suggests, it suggests that maybe Eric had an exaggerated sense of fear, or he exaggerated the detail to portray a heightened sense of fear, kind of being more dramatic, trying to get more attention, to get people to validate why he would have killed his mother. Then the prosecutor goes ahead and he goes the next step farther, and he says, specifically says, asks, well, were you trying to mislead the jury? And he makes that to mislead the jury to appeal more credible. And, he's pretty much saying, well, are you spinning it this way to make yourself more sympathetic, to try to, get off these charges or whatever, what have you? Are you trying to make it look like it was a bigger thing than what it was? And it's kind of he's indirectly suggesting dishonesty on Eric's part. I'm going to come over here and peek in and see if there's any questions. Well, Frank, I don't know that we can necessarily go with 100% innocent and that, you know, if they were girls, that nothing would have happened and that it's a double standard. The boys already admitted to killing their parents. So that's really not in question. I think that there's been plenty of other women that have gone to jail or prison after killing, say, an abusive partner. That has happened. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a double standard. But yeah, this is a tough situation. I'm trying to remember. I think it's called parricide. When kids, you know, kill their parents, it's very rare. It doesn't happen very often. And especially in this situation, this was back in the early 1990s, where this was back when it was only little girls that were sexually abused. That was the belief back then. So this was like, you know, this trial is the first time that this is really coming up. And at this time, we didn't know very much about the negative impacts, how deeply children are impacted by abuse and how it shapes a child's mind and their decision making. We didn't know all of that back when this happened. So it's a difficult one to get through. And with, you know, it's kind of the hindsight bias with, you know, everything that we know now. It's like, didn't we know that back then? No, we didn't really know that back then. So, but yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hop over to, I think this is going to be some of Lyle's testimony.
Concerned with what was happening with Eric. If he was in a bad mood, he might slap Eric or push Eric away. If he was in a good mood, he might hang out with Eric. But it was different. Like, I had to be doing something. I was achieving something or something of importance. And it was very different.
So you had more attention. Would you say there were more expectations of you also?
Definitely.
Was one of the things that your father made decisions about with regard to your sports training the food that you would eat?
Yes.
And throughout your childhood, did his ideas about the proper foods change?
Not too much. I mean, it was always very important to him.
Okay. And what was the instruction with regard to food? Were you told what you could eat?
Yes.
Were you told when you could eat it?
No. I mean, there were some meals he felt it depended on what was happening that day. If there was a practice, it would be 3 hours before. He wouldn't tolerate 2.5 hours. It would be 3. And then there would be certain foods involved. And if there wasn't a practice and I was just going to school, I would just know the things that I had to stay away from or I had to eat. Or
Such as?
Stay away from sugar, dairy products. That changed because there were times when dairy products were a big thing. It depended on what he was reading, whatever was in the literature. If it was the Eat to Win diet, if it was something else. Usually he had books that would list what you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then like strategies for how early. But he changed his philosophy a lot because I remember him reading about Pancho Gonzalez would fast during the tournament. And so I did that for a period of time where I would just not eat for, 12 hours at a time, have a small meal, not eat all day again. That wasn't working very well, so we switched.
How old were you when you were doing the Pancho Gonzalez fasting program?
13, when I was just becoming real competitive.
And you were playing a lot of tennis at that time, I take it.
Yes, it was only tennis at that point.
How many hours a day were you playing tennis?
At 13?
Yes.
Six. Probably like 40, 45 hours a week.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. 4 or 5 hours?
45, 40 hours a week.
40 to 45 hours a week? And this is when you're 13 and you're going to school also? Yes?
Yes.
Now, did you sit down and talk with your dad about these food programs and sort of decide together what you were going to do in terms of your diet? Or did he decide?
I could pick out foods from the different categories.
When you said he wanted you to stay away from sugar, from junk food, that was an important theme with him, I take it.
Yes.
And if you violated that rule, would he enforce the rules?
Well, sometimes I violated the rule, yeah, and he would enforce the rules.
Was there a situation where you bought some food during the time you were playing soccer that you weren't supposed to buy?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was about 11, almost.
And what happened?
Is it at the Lawrenceville Deli? At the Lawrenceville Deli, we stopped there routinely on the way from or to the soccer fields from where our house was in Pennington. And my dad would be buying the things he felt he wanted for me, and the guy behind the counter was very friendly. They'd had the place forever, and he knew me every time I came in my soccer clothes. Basically, he sneaked me in a bag, some pastries and cookies and stuff. He just sort of put it in with everything else my dad was buying, and I took it out when my dad wasn't looking.
Did your dad find him?
He found them on me outside the store.
Were you eating them?
I was eating them. Yes.
And what did your dad do?
He just grabbed them out of my hand, and he just grabbed me by the neck. He just punched me in the stomach.
Did he say anything?
No, he dragged me to the car, and I don't believe that he said anything. I knew what was obvious.
Excuse me, Your Honor, could you ask the witness to keep your voice up?
Yes, if you could speak up a little bit.
The picture that
Some pretty intense testimony there, huh? I don't know how people raise their kids. I know that kids do a lot more training and stuff like that, but for our age group, people that are in their late 40s, early 50s, that was a lot of, training. 40 to 45 hours a week that would have been a lot of time spent practicing a sport. And it sounds like that. Lyle's dad was pretty intense, about the diet and managing all of that. And obviously physically abusive as well. Can be a few problems, especially, around the extreme diet and the, I guess, kind of extreme, like, the rigid, I'm trying to think of the word, kind of, format throughout the day. Cannot think of the word. But it can be perceived. One perception, you can either be like, oh, that's so terrible. But then other people can perceive it another way that it's being used as an excuse. That's why that makes it okay that the way that regiment the fathers, by having such a rigid regimen of how these boys live, that that's a justification. It makes it okay for the children of parents with very rigid world perspective. Then it makes it okay to kill their parents. We all know, no, it doesn't. It's not okay to kill people. Even if you are being abused, it still isn't okay, and there's still going to be repercussions for it. Then we also, with the extreme diet and the really super high expectations, they're kind of the way that this is being played out, that it's, the situation that it was an inevitable outcome for the boys to kill their parents. And it's ignoring that a lot of people experience similar pressures without resorting to violence. Not every abused child kills their parent. Not every abused child goes on to abuse others. And, the reasoning that's being presented is the direct causal link between the dietary restrictions and the eventual violence. It suggests that the father's strict rules led directly to Lyle's actions, while other factors, they might have also been a part of what happened. They might have had an equal amount of, I can't think. They might have played a part into what happened with this as well. The defense counsel is, of course, they're presenting a very slanted argument to their clients, to defend their clients. They're also, they're also kind of making a hasty generalization. There's this thing about kids where a lot of kids have a tendency to remember it's the negative things that get our attention, that startle us, that, if we got, if our parents, yelled at us or just, kind of barked at us, don't do that. That's the things that kind of startle you, and it gets your focus. And the defense counsel, they're kind of looking at just a few instances of, abusive behavior, while they're ignoring that overall, there might have been plenty of other times where the father was more lenient. So what happens is defense counsel is painting a very skewed picture, and they're just basing it on a few very limited examples rather than a balanced view of the relationship. And this testimony also suggests that the boys' only options were to continuing suffering under their father's expectations, or take drastic action and kill their parents. And it kind of creates this false dichotomy that they only had two solutions, when there are a lot of other solutions. There are things like they could have left, they could have sought help, find other ways to negotiate or cope with the expectations. Presenting violence as the only solution, it really oversimplifies the situation. Then they're kind of also, Lyle is, his argument that his father justified his dietary and training expectation based on sports tradition or other athletes' practice, that can imply that these extreme measures were normal or acceptable because they align with what another competitive athlete endures. However, oops. Then there's also, finally, if Lyle exaggerates or simplifies his father's expectations to make them seem more unreasonable than they were, it can kind of create a straw man argument where portraying his father in an exaggerated negative light, that makes it easier for him to criticize. And, you know, all of these kind of little arguments that are kind of being implied and they're going on, you know, kind of just under the surface of what is being spoken, it can serve to undermine the boy's defense and the argument, and because it can look like they're trying to play on emotions too much instead of using evidence-based reasoning, and it creates a unbalanced view of the parental expectations and the impact on Lyle. So that's something that it's like we kind of need to keep that in our heads, that, you know, somebody can be exaggerating. They can be oversimplifying something so that it looks worse than what it is. That's the reason that's when we need to stop and ask questions about what is going on. We need to know, oh, this is something, you know, kind of put up your little, you know, little antenna and be like, oh, this is something we need to stop and take a closer look at. We need more information. And then I think I just have, I've got two more.
It took up any time he wasn't working. Yeah.
And did your mother ever express any resentment about that?
Oh, yes, many, many times.
What would she say?
She would say many things. She would say that I ruined her life, and she would explain to me why and how I ruined her life.
What would she tell you about why and how you ruined her life?
Well, if it was like, if she wasn't in a tantrum and she was just speaking normally, she would just explain all the things that she could have been: an actress, broadcasting. I learned about her aspirations with disappointments with not being a child actress and wanting to go on in some acting or broadcasting sense. And she told me that she had a job in New York to be a hostess at a restaurant, that she said she could make almost $50,000 a year, and that then suddenly she had gotten pregnant, that she had not wanted to get pregnant, that my dad had then forced her, well, gave her an ultimatum: either you leave or you stay home with my son and quit. And so she chose to stay home, and essentially her life was pretty much ruined from that point on. But then we would have more discussions about how much money was being spent on my tennis, all my dad's time on my tennis, who cares, and then I would hear about the lessons she couldn't have, the things that she couldn't have. And then there would be other times when she was in a tantrum. And then it would just come out very, in a rage.
What would come out in a rage?
She would be throwing things and screaming and flailing and wanting and trying to hit you and saying that you're a bastard. And she cursed a lot. And that wait till your dad gets home, I'll tell him the things that you didn't do today, and I wish you were never born, and why can't you be like your brother, and what's the matter with you? And then I would try to say something. She would say, shut up, I don't want to hear it. You're stupid. I hate you.
How old were you when you heard things like, "I wish you were never born"?
So, 7.
Thank you. That's the end of that area now.
Okay, we'll take a recess, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll resume at 15 minutes after the hour. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 3:15. And all the
Okay, so this one, this can really, I guess there's kind of a subtle ad hominem attack on Kitty's character. She's really, what he's saying about her right now, it sounds like she was very cold, said horrible things to her, at least Lyle, and I'm sure Eric. It's really painting her as, a really kind of crummy mother, very selfish, very childish. It's really painting her in a very bad light. And there's that subtle, attack on her character. And then there's also the fact of the matter is we're only going from Lyle's testimony. We don't have access to Kitty's side of the conversation. We can't really verify that stuff. I don't know what situation would make it so that a parent would say some of the things that she said. But, when we're using an unverified claim to assert a definite truth, that's something else that we have to be really careful of and, really keep our, little antenna out there for is if we're only hearing one side of the story. Because a lot of times, and I've noticed that especially on YouTube, things are taken out of context. You can think, oh my gosh, this person said this horrible thing. And it's like, yeah, they did say that horrible thing. But all of this other stuff was going on around it. So maybe it was justified for someone to say or do something. So with that, again, they're kind of appealing to emotion, and I'm not going to say, I think that Lyle genuinely was on the verge of tears. I'm also going to say that I think Jill she was kind of pushing that line, who wouldn't start, who wouldn't be very hurt and have it bring up a lot of bad memories, to hear that your parents never wanted you, that you were, that you made their life worse. And, and then the mother is saying, it was a waste of money for the tennis lessons. Tennis is something that, that he really enjoyed. And, it's, putting down something that someone else enjoys. Who doesn't get defensive about when someone puts down something that we enjoy? We want to argue for it. So, overall, she's really the defense attorney is trying to demonstrate that that there is a lack of love there, and this would bias the listener's perception without providing substantial evidence of consistent neglect or animosity. These are just a few instances that were really, really bad. And the attorney is highlighting these to make it seem like it's something bigger when it's just a few instances. Everybody makes mistakes when they're, raising their children. All of us have, our own garbage and our own trauma to work through. So, no parent gets it all right, you know. So to focus on these few little things, it's not really a reasonable picture of what all is going on. Okay, so we're going to hop to one last bit of Eric's testimony, and then I think that's going to be it. All right, let's go.
The day that you came back after the memorial service in New Jersey was the day that the computer people were there and that Casey Whalen picked you up from the airport?
I know that Casey Whalen picked me up from the airport. It's my best recollection that it was on September 1st, mostly because Casey's mother and his sister remember it was that day.
Okay, do you remember, Casey Whalen testified and he said that he picked you up from the airport on September 1st, 1989, correct?
Yes.
And that he took you back to the Beverly Hills house
Yes.
and that he left your luggage in his car.
I don't remember if he testified to that.
Yeah, your suitcases were in the car and you went inside the house for a period of time.
Yes.
And that when you were upstairs checking on your answer machine, you were called downstairs and that's when you saw this computer man.
Yes, that's what he testified to.
And he said that he didn't remember a woman with him, with the computer man.
To this accumulation and recitation of other witnesses' testimony.
Ask another question, please.
Do you remember discussing this with Casey Whalen, the fact that there was this computer person at the house on the day that you came back from the East Coast?
I never discussed it with Casey.
And he had stated in his testimony, Casey Whalen, that Craig Signorelli was not there on that day.
Objection.
On the day that he brought you home from the airport?
Yeah, I'm going to object to that as calling from the PM for which of other witnesses. I would ask you for
Objection overruled as to that question.
What Casey remembers and his sister and his mother remember is what they remember. My memory is more vague than theirs.
Okay, you said that you remember, I believe when your attorney asked you, you said that you remember specifically that the day you came back is the day that the computer man was at your house.
That's my best memory. That is my best memory, but I wasn't as sure about it until I heard that Casey, his mother and his sister confirmed that that is the day.
Well, could it have been the next day that the computer man came?
It is possible.
Okay, and so when Casey Whalen said that he didn't know where you were the next day, that he just took you and brought you home and took you to your car that day, could that be possible?
I don't know if he testified to that. I know he testified that the next day, if I came in on a Friday, then the next day he did drive me back to my house. If I came in on a Thursday, then it was the Friday that he took me back to my house. But those days went by so quick for me. I don't remember as much as I would like to.
Now, when you came back from the East Coast, normally before your parents...
I don't know how they bought tickets or didn't, or by whom.
Once your parents were killed, did you get yourself a credit card or anything of that sort?
Yeah, my Aunt Martha gave me a credit card.
Now, do you recall purchasing a ticket to come back from New Jersey with a credit card?
I don't recall. I know that most of my tickets that I bought went through my Aunt Terry, who was a travel agent. But very well could have. I just don't have a good memory of it.
Okay, do you remember where you were Well, which airport did you fly out of to come back to Los Angeles from the East Coast?
My best recollection is that I flew out of Newark.
From where?
Newark.
Newark Airport?
Yeah.
Do you remember going to that airport and
Okay, is this any better? I'm going to go ahead and hopefully I'm going to go ahead and start talking, and hopefully it's getting better. Somebody will pop up and say that it's getting better. So anyway, pretty much the whole point of this testimony right here is there is no point. It doesn't. Yes, the computer man was at the house, and yes, he was there to delete some stuff, to remove some stuff from a monkey girl's mama. Thanks for stopping in. But pretty much that it is important that the computer guy was there, but all of this jostling around with who picked up who from the airport and when and stuff like that. It really, the only point is to distract the listener, to distract the jury from the emotion, the whole emotionality of all of this testimony of the case and all of that. The defense counsel, they're really hitting that really hard and trying to really, illustrate, what it was like for the boys that would have, pushed them to the point where that they would kill their parents. Well, I don't even see Rowena. Oh, it's you, Monkey. You changed your name to Monkey Girl's Mama Row. Okay. I have a feeling that has something to do with Queen. One of the fun names with Queen moments. But anyway, so basically the point is that there is no point. This is basically, it's stuff, I don't know if you guys noticed it or maybe you want to go back and look. I know that when I was watching it, I kind of stopped and I was like, what? Wait a minute, what? It kind of pulls you into where you get completely distracted with this evidence or, this testimony. And it's also, you can tell it's distracting Eric as well. He's kind of like, I don't know, kind of like, I guess to me, I would have been like, well, we're here to talk about, my parents dying and my involvement. Why are we talking about the computer guy? Why are we talking about who picked me up from a trip and all of that? That's stuff that I've had a hard time finding the purpose of, other than it was there to distract from what was going on with the boys, that they would have gone to this, to this extent. So, and the prosecution was trying to say it was about money, and defense was trying to say that it was about abuse. And so where does the computer guy fall into this? I mean, yeah, he deleted some stuff, but that's pretty, at least to me, that's pretty cut and dry. Oh, you deleted this just a few days after the parents died. Well, that's problematic. Oh, you searched The search terms that the boys asked you to search were the words Will, Eric, Lyle, and I think there was some other words they searched. It's like, that's pretty problematic. But the stuff about who picked up who from the airport and when, that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the case, or that he was given a credit card after his aunt gave him a credit card after his parents died. For this family, they used credit cards a lot, and he didn't have a credit card after his parents died. So he needs a credit card. It's very simple. Doesn't mean anything. At least to me, it wouldn't mean anything to me. Just like the testimony about the computer guy. It doesn't really have any kind of bearing on what was going on with these boys that led to a situation where they would kill them. It doesn't really tell me anything about what would delineate their parents' death, what would delineate manslaughter from murder. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't play into it. I feel like now I'm just talking in circles. But that's pretty much about it. I hope you guys got something out of this as far as, kind of listening. When we listen to these trials, we have to listen more for, well, what is, kind of ask ourselves, like, well, what is this person, where are they going with this? And kind of listen to what people are saying, but also listen to what they're not saying. Is pretty much, that's about it. Is, prosecution isn't going to say, oh, no, don't pay attention to that, ignore that. They're not going to say that. That's too obvious. They're going to just try to distract you with something else. So yeah, we've got to, when we listen to these trials, when we listen to, people in daily life, there are the things that people are telling us, but then there's also what isn't being said, that we have to read between the lines and, think of, if somebody brings you this big emotional story, well, why are they bringing this big emotional story to me? So that's about it. I just wanted to encourage everybody to kind of, get to thinking more critically. Why are people coming to you with the things that they're coming to you with? Sometimes, you have to be careful when you buy a car. You have to, again, a lot of times on these YouTube streets, we hear a lot of very emotional stories, and we're only hearing one side of it, and people they'll take a side when it's obvious, or when there always has to be another side. So I hope everybody enjoyed this live stream. I hope you guys got something from it, kind of got your brains working a little bit more, kind of, looking for these things to happen around you. And, everybody start thinking and, listen to what people are saying, but then also kind of, you'll get a feeling kind of a feeling in your body when, people are trying to draw you into specific kinds of arguments. So that's about it. And thank you again, everybody, for coming in. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. And I will see you guys out there on these YouTube streets. Thanks. Bye.